My name, you heard already, Joel Aaron. I'm with, or Joel Foster, with Americans for Prosperity Foundation. I'm the grassroots communications guy. And our panel today, we are honored to have a really exciting panel talking about school choice and how to promote it in Georgia and how you can get involved in championing the choice environment, which essentially what we mean when we say choice is promoting choice to parents and students, to put parents and students and teachers in the driver's seat in the decisions that are made about education. And that's ultimately the big, fat, hairy, audacious goal we talk about all the time. So it's really exciting because our panelists today have been on the front lines of this movement for quite a while. Andrew, all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank. Long? No? Lewis. I know an Andrew Long too, and I'm like, I always get your last name mixed up. Andrew Lewis is Vice President, correct, of the Georgia Charter School Association, and he's going to talk today a little bit about how to start a charter school. What are the steps that you need to take? Some of the programs that they are involved in at the Georgia Charter School Association is the state's kind of preeminent organization for starting and launching and being hand in hand with folks that want to be involved in the charter school movement. We also have Danielle LeSure, and she is the director of the
Education Policy.
Education
Center for Opportunities.
Georgia Center for Opportunity. We changed names last year, so we're trying to learn new names too. But Danielle works a lot with the school choice movement, and she's going to talk about specifically student scholarship organizations, SSOs, that we have here in Georgia. How do you contribute? How do you get involved financially in supporting the choice movement in Georgia? Georgia already has some mechanisms in place for doing that. She's going to talk a little bit about that, and also kind of how to message on the ground when you're talking to folks out there about the choice movement and really what it is. And then finally, Nancy Jester, who is the former DeKalb school board member. She's also the one, she tells me, holding the calculator today. So she's going to crunch some numbers for us, and she's going to tell us the kind of things like how do you do an open records request for information related to the school board in your local community. How do you track the numbers? What are some of the arguments they give, the misinformation that is given when they're trying to hold you at arm's length in really getting at the truth of what's going on at the local school level, the local school board, and what's going on there. So she's going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to start out with each of them presenting to us for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So we're going to start with Danielle, and she's going to kick us off today. So give her a warm welcome from AFPA.
It's always exciting to talk to people who have an interest in school choice options because there's not too many in Georgia who know all the different types of options that parents have. As the Director of Education Policy at the Georgia Center for Opportunity, my job is to be the one to get all the complaints from parents who are calling to say, I need a way out of my horrible school, please help me. Sometimes it will not only be public schools, sometimes it can be private schools. A lot of calls from special needs parents, not recognizing all the options that they have. So before talking to advocates to get involved in school choice, I say, well, let's first make sure you know of all the options. So today I'm hoping that I can give you an overview of all the options. Is that okay? It's going to be a crash course, but I'm pretty sure you can call up myself or Virginia, and we can sit down and have coffee with you and dig a little deeper. So the first option, of course, is public schools. We all know what a public school is, right? And the other option that I love to talk about, especially with AFP and knowing Virginia's heart, is homeschooling as well. So you have to make sure that in terms of school choice options, you include those two because those are options that parents take. But as time went on, we also have options such as charter schools. Does anyone know the difference between a charter school and a traditional public school besides Andrew Lewis? Anyone want to take a guess? Go ahead.
I would imagine that the charter school has much more flexibility.
That's right.
That's
right. That's correct. So the great thing about a charter school is that, you know, they have the same standards as public schools. However, they get the freedom to make sure they meet those standards however best. The advantage to charters that I like to say is that they do more with less money. And so that's the thing that I love about charters because they teach our state how to be efficient with dollars and how to really hold ourselves accountable for having an impact for students. So the accountability is definitely high for our charters. The other option is special needs scholarships. So there are IEPs, individualized education plans, that a special needs student can receive from a public school. And that IEP has written up everything that that student needs to be successful as a student with a disability. And let's say if I'm a parent with an IEP and my student is in a public school that I think it's not really meeting, the needs that he has or she has in terms of, let's say, a learning disability, I can say, you know what, I am interested in putting my child in a private school. And I'm interested in this one particular private school in Gwinnett, and is there a way I can get a special needs scholarship for that? So what they'll do is the state will say, you know what, you have about this much that you receive in support. Let's say it could be $9,000. And instead of using that in the public school, you can take that $9,000 that we give you in a public school setting and apply that to a private school that's on our list. And if there are any special needs parent, I carry the list in my trunk, believe it or not, of all the registered private schools that you can use a special needs scholarship for. But wait, there's more. This is like an infomercial. So in addition to the special needs scholarship, one thing that I like to tell special needs parents is also consider the fact that you can put your child in any public school as long as there's an open spot. So it's important for our parents to know that as well. I had one special needs parent call me and said, you know what, I am not satisfied with the public school system, and the private school system that I want to go to, they're not giving me enough money with my special needs scholarship because they didn't write up that IEP correctly, because the amount that you receive is based on that IEP. They said, Danielle, please help, I don't have any hope. And that's where you say, do you know what a charter school is? And the parent didn't know what a charter school was, and was able to work with that parent and a really great charter school, Ivy Prep Girls in Gwinnett, to help that parent. Yes?
Do charter schools always provide the special needs classes? Or do they ever choose not to, or are they
They cannot choose not to by law. They can't do that. Most charter schools, they do their best to meet the needs of that individual student. I have seen some parents decide, you know what, I don't want my child to go to this charter school. I'd rather for them to go to a private school. But because the charter school is a public school, right, they still receive that IEP and they can still qualify for the special needs scholarship. So, and that was a recent situation that I just had. So it was interesting because I have one parent wanting to get into a charter school and then another parent from that same charter school wanting to get out. So by being the one on the other line, I know, well, that's going to create an open spot for this parent who wants to go here for her special needs kid, and then to help the other special needs student get into the private school that they want to get into. So it's really about parent choice and where the parent feels comfortable knowing their student and knowing what works best. The last option I'm going to mention is a tax credit scholarship. I'm not sure if anyone heard about the tax credit scholarship at all. Is that a new one for you? So if I am a parent of a public school student, and let's say I'm not satisfied with my public school, and there might be a wonderful private school that I think could be awesome for my student. There are different student scholarship organizations that work with private schools where they'll help to give scholarships. And the scholarships are funded by taxpayers. And that's why it's called tax credit. So let's say as an individual, I want to give to a student scholarship organization. I can give up to $2,500, and I can get tax credit for that. And each SSO, there's over 30 of them, maybe about 35, 38, I think. I actually have the list on me. They work with different schools and they have different rules. That's where it can be confusing for parents. And they cannot give anything over $9,000 because they calculate what the average would be for the state, so approximately $9,000. And it's a great option for all parents. The program, and I'm going to mention this because I think it's important. Some people assume that, oh, this must be a program just for low-income students. This program was not designed for low-income students. This program was designed for all students. And each SSO works differently, they give differently, and they work with the school to really figure out the financial need. So what I like to tell parents is if you're going to a private school, ask if they're participating in the tax credit scholarship program. But remember that the gatekeeper, your secretary, administrator, may not know that word or that term. So then ask, are you working with an SSO, a student scholarship organization? And usually then they'll know, and then you'll know if there are additional financial aid options available. So after you know all your options, it's important to tell your neighbor. And what I'd like to tell the advocates that we work with and train is, I don't need you to know all the nitty-gritty details. I just need you to know of it so that you can tell someone else and give them my phone number, Virginia's phone number, someone's phone number who can help walk you through the process. Because sometimes we have to be advocates for our advocates. We have to be advocates for parents who call disgruntled, nervous, scared about navigating the system. And I think it's just important for all Georgians to know that there are different options. But what you'll run into is that, unfortunately, in some areas, I hate to say this, there's not an option. So this is where we need advocates, because we need the expansion of school choice. I get calls from rural areas in the South, and you'll be amazed at some of the things that happen there too. You know, there's violence in those schools as well that students face, and at the same time there's gag orders put out where they can't talk about it. And then they don't have a way out of that system. And I'm glad that Andrew's here, because he's going to talk about charter applications and authorization and the need to start charter schools, because we don't have enough options. Yes?
On the public school transfer, I don't know if the special needs is that part of the public school transfer legislation, or is that separate?
It's separate.
And the problem is, these schools, I'm hearing from moms,
Yeah.
that they are listing their schools as full. That
Right.
we have no spots.
Right, so the other option that I didn't mention is public school transfers, which I have information on. However, the way that is being implemented is horrible. You know, and in terms of the transparency with districts, I think there's a need to help with that legislation. If I'm working with a parent in particular, I'll mention that, but because there's so much we have to do with public school transfers, you know, that's something we can talk about, because there's a need there.
Thank you. I sit on the Cobb County School Board. In our district, we have a lottery every year for school choice, and we've really made an attempt to make it more transparent and more so that parents feel like there truly is a lottery. It really is.
Right.
It's done publicly. And I think that's important. I think the overall feeling, though, should be that there's choice. Whatever that choice is, that there's a choice. It's either, you know, whether you go to public school or charter school, whatever
Right.
that is. So I think there are more schools that are trying to be more open and more transparent about that. But it is going to take education, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, and to be honest, you know, sometimes I get beat up in the school choice movement, because we really see it in my organization. We see public schools as an option, because there are some great public schools in addition to charter schools that we need to recognize. And you know, parents of special needs students, I like to say, make sure you consider that too, because you may not find the right fit in a private school, because you may not afford it even after the tax credit scholarship, the special needs scholarship. And you know, you may not like the charter school option. Homeschooling may not work for you. I had a parent who tried homeschooling her special needs and reached a certain point where it's like, well, this is too much on me as a mom, and now there's new financial needs for my family. And it's important to recognize that there are public schools doing great things.
Okay, if you'll hold your questions real quick, because we want to move through everything. I know we're limited on time. Thank you, Danielle, and we'll hopefully have a little bit more time for some more Q&A with the whole panel at the end. But I want to move on to Andrew now, and Andrew, you're going to give us an overview of where we sit on charter schools as a state, and then some of the mechanics that are going into starting.
What I think is very important is a little bit of, in my mind, a little bit of background about myself and why I have been with the Charter Association for going on 9 years. I grew up just a couple of miles away from here. Very, very, very fortunate. My parents exercised school choice by sending me to Woodward Academy, a wonderful private school south of Atlanta. An incredible educational experience. My wife and I we're very, very fortunate, but not so fortunate to be able to send our children to Woodward Academy. That is something that we are unable to afford. So for us, school choice was us moving to City of Decatur, a very small community, small city school system, very strong public school system, and that is how we have exercised our school choice. But the vast majority of individuals in our city, in our state, and around our nation do not have the resources to be able to afford to look at public school versus private school. Homeschooling is something that is very, very difficult for a single parent household, let alone a two-parent household. So there comes charter schools. And a charter school, for me, at its simplest, empowers a parent to be able to ask themselves one very, very simple question. And that is, what is the best setting for my child? Is it the charter public school? Is it the traditional public school? But it takes that decision-making out of the hands of the Georgia General Assembly. It takes that decision-making out of the hands of a local board of education, and it places that decision-making in the hands of a parent. A very personal decision for a parent to make of what is that setting that is going to be most conducive for my child to get a high-quality public education. I sit here and I am truly agnostic when it comes to what is a best setting for a child. That is a decision that is best left to a parent. So for me and my wife, we have made a decision. For each one of you, it's going to be very, very different. But to have a choice in public education is so very important for parents and communities. Here in Georgia, what does the charter sector look like? Well, Georgia has one of the most fragmented charter sectors around the nation. In most states, you have charter schools, which are very clear-cut. Charter schools are self-governing, autonomous, public schools of choice. Here in Georgia, we have many different types of charter schools that you may or may not have heard of. We have charter schools that are started by, in conjunction with a local board of education. We have commission charter schools, which are charter schools approved by a state commission. You may be familiar with the Charter Schools Amendment that was passed in November of last year. That amendment allowed the Georgia Charter Schools Commission to be able to approve charter schools in the state of Georgia. We also have system charters. You may be familiar with Fulton County. My district, Decatur, are both system charters. So this has made, I think, it quite confusing for the general population of what is a charter school. So for Georgia Charter Schools Association, what we have attempted to do is better define for parents, for the General Assembly, using one word. Is the charter autonomous? Meaning, does the board of the charter school have the ability to make decisions on financial decisions, on staffing decisions, two of the most important decisions that the governing board of a charter school can make? Can that board hire and fire the staff that they feel are going to be able to execute its mission and vision in providing a high-quality public school option for the community that they are attempting to serve? If that autonomy is not there, then we place the charter in the category of being a dependent charter school. So for Fulton County, which is a charter system, or my school district, City Schools of Decatur, which is as well a charter district, we place those in a dependent category. That the decision-making at school level is not there with regards to financial and staffing. So in Georgia, if we look at all of the charter schools in the state, there are over 300 charter schools, and that includes system charters. If we look at simply autonomous charter schools, that number drops down to 76 charters across the state of Georgia, with the vast majority being within about a 30 square mile area of where we're sitting. In Georgia, one of the areas that why the charter sector is starting to really take hold, as Danielle was referencing, parents are seeing that their child may not fit within the traditional setting, or the traditional setting is not meeting the needs of their communities. So parents or teachers, or a combination of the two, have said, you know, providing our community with an option in K-12 education is something that is going to be beneficial for our children, our parents, our community. And they have gotten together and they have investigated, they have looked at best practices within the charter sector, whether in Georgia or across the United States, and they have worked to put together what is called a petition. A petition is the contract or the charter, and it is what holds the group accountable. We have a petition that has been approved by whether the local Board of Education or the State Charter Commission, and we have said in this contract, in this charter, we will live up to certain academic and operational goals that are spelled out quite clearly in that contract. And if the charter fails to meet the goals set within that contract, that charter runs the risk of being held accountable. Something that we do not see within the traditional public school setting. Holding a school accountable, if they're not meeting their goals, they run the risk of closure. So a few things that come to mind. One, how are charter schools doing in Georgia? There are many charter schools in the state that are doing magnificent work, most especially when they're compared to the traditional public schools that are close by. We can look at how many of you in the room are familiar with, I'll throw out a few different examples. Drew Charter School in the Eastlake community of Atlanta. Drew Charter School was a charter, an initiative in the Eastlake community. When growing up here in Atlanta, Eastlake was thought of as a community that was one of the most dangerous areas of Atlanta, in a city that was recognized as, at that time, the murder capital of the United States. And the educational outcomes in that area were deplorable. It also happens to be home of the Eastlake Golf Course, very famous Bobby Jones golf course. A gentleman named Tom Cousins that you may be familiar with. Tom Cousins, who deeply loves Atlanta, came in and worked with that community and established the Drew Charter School and also a YMCA to be pillars of an economic reform in that community. now 12 years later, Drew Charter School is not only recognized as one of the top performing public schools in Atlanta, it is considered one of the top performing public schools in the state of Georgia. We have KIPP schools in downtown Atlanta. We have one of my favorite schools. Is anybody here besides Rich Thompson familiar with a small town in southwest Georgia called Edison, Georgia? The mighty metropolis of Edison, Georgia. If you are driving and you blink, you very well may miss Edison, Georgia.
So true.
Edison, Georgia is home to Patala Charter Academy, a school that in the most rural and poor area of our state is changing what public education means in a community that so desperately deserves change in public education. So those are examples of charter schools that are changing and doing incredible work. But at the same time, we have charter schools that are not living up to their obligation. We have a school board member from Cobb County. Cobb County has seen a few charter schools in recent years that were not living up to their obligation. And Cobb County Board of Education, I'm sure it was an incredibly difficult decision, but having to hold a charter school accountable for not living up to its obligation and say, I am sorry, but we are not seeing you live up to your obligations academically, operationally, or both, and we cannot allow the school to proceed forward. Now, it is my hope that there will be more groups down the line that come to Cobb County and try to fill in the gaps where there are communities that want public school options. But I applaud Cobb County for being able to say we want charter schools, and then few years down the line saying, as much as we want charter schools, we also have a responsibility to our community, and our charter was not living up to that responsibility. So, to start a charter school, you really need devoted community members. You need a strong founding board. A founding board that has strengths in many different areas. Individuals that have strengths in finance, in law, in education, of course. Being able to put blood, sweat, and tears into putting together an application, spelling out exactly what they're hoping to accomplish, and being able to show that there is a desire within the community, that there is a marketplace, so to speak, within the community to be able to establish a charter school. It is not for the faint of heart to be able to start a public school that is responsible for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of public funds. That is an incredible responsibility. But I do fully believe that is a responsibility that community members can and do want for themselves. Right now, I think Nancy probably will make mention of it, there's a community in Druid Hills. The Druid Hills community in DeKalb County has been, in many respects, frustrated. And they have been working with my association in wanting to take advantage of a little known part of the Georgia charter school law, which is called a charter cluster. And that allows for the conversion of all the schools within the high school cluster. The high school, the middle school, and the elementary schools that all feed into that high school, and do what I feel is something so very unique and so very innovative. They want to take, have a 501c3 nonprofit board like any of the truly autonomous charter schools, and they want to empower their principals with staffing decision-making, with financial decision-making, and they want to be able to bring the ability to connect the schools from kindergarten through 12th grade together in a manner that is seamless, and a manner that allows the high school principal to be more or less the CEO of the cluster. That her responsibility, first and foremost, is for her high school, but she, at the exact same time, is just as concerned with the middle school and the elementary feeder schools, because those are the same students that she will be receiving in the years to come. As the CEO of that cluster, she then reports to the 501c3 nonprofit board. And that board holds her accountable to results. We will see if the DeKalb County Board of Education will move forward on such a innovative practice. I certainly hope that they do. Some other quick points. How much time do I have?
Well, we're kind of over. So if you could real quick in kind of wrapping up,
Yep.
And then we'll move on. But give them a little bit about the program that you guys offer, so that if they want more information on how to get involved in the process, they can check that out as well.
Two very quick things. One, my association, two different things that we do. We are an advocacy organization attempting to promote stronger environment for charter schools, and two, a resource organization. And as a resource organization, two of our programs that I would like to highlight: Charter Start, which assists community groups in being able to start a charter school within their community. It is a difficult process, and needing to have individuals that understand charter school law, education, student funding. Student funding in the state of Georgia is very, very complicated. You need individuals that can assist you. The other program, as I mentioned earlier, one of the areas that charter schools, where you find a strong charter school, you will find a strong charter school board. And we have our charter board bank, recruiting high capacity individuals across the state that are willing to sit on the boards of charter schools, whether existing or future charter schools, to help ensure that they have a strong governing board that understands their own roles and responsibilities of being a board of a charter. And the last point that I will make, Georgia is at a place where we can see very strong charter school growth, and it is due to individuals like Governor Deal, individuals like Representatives Jan Jones, Ed Lindsay, Alicia Thomas Morgan, Margaret Kaiser, who have been willing to step forward and been willing to, in the case of Alicia Morgan and Margaret Kaiser, take on their own party in support of providing communities with high-quality public school options. So those are individuals that I simply wanted to highlight, that they have provided an environment that allows communities to be able to pursue such endeavors.
And as you would probably well agree, the board really is the linchpin for a successful charter. And so that bank, we would encourage you to check into that if it's something that interests you, because that is an immense need as we grow the charter movement and provide these kind of options, public school options to students around the state. So thank you, Andrew, for bringing that up. I want to turn over to Nancy Jester now, former DeKalb school board member. She's going to talk a little bit about some of it, when you're in the firefight, so to speak, some of the arguments that you hear against more choice from some of the usual suspects. You've been dealing with all this directly. And then give us some financial background on the choice movement and how to get involved. So I'll bring up your slides and you're good to go.
And I don't have a clicker, right? You'll.
No, I'm looking for you.
Okay. The first one's just how to get in touch with me, and you can go to my website and read my blog and so on, and follow me on Twitter if you want. So we've talked a lot about accountability here and choice, and choice improves accountability. I think we need to understand that. And so often when we talk about accountability, we do so, and the first thing that comes to our mind is testing results. So we focus on these classrooms and the teachers, and it's very, it's sort of an oppressive type of accountability discussion, but we talk very little about holding the educational bureaucracy accountable and systemically holding them accountable. And I think that's what we need to do. One of the things we've also talked about here is about, well, we have lotteries, and we want to make them transparent and fair. But what a lottery tells us is demand is exceeding supply. And what's the market signal there? And what do you do about that? That's a market signal. It may not be a consumer marketplace like you go into the grocery store and you would see inventory or prices fluctuate, but it is an important market signal. So what then are the educational bureaucrats doing about this demand that they're not meeting? They are required to do nothing. They could they could have wait lists in perpetuity. They can have lotteries in perpetuity. There is no regulation or law that requires them to look at this market signal they're getting that says parents want more choices. Parents want more charter schools. They want more of this charter school or more of this type, more different programs, language programs, all the different types of things that they may have a lottery for. And there is no mechanism from our state level to insist that they try and meet those demands. So I think that's a reform we need to talk about, and we need to understand that these choices really hold these educational bureaucrats accountable in this sort of market way, because people vote with their feet. So even more than test scores, when people look at those, they are sometimes difficult to really peel apart and get down to the nitty-gritty of what does that test score mean? Because you may be talking about a school that educates children that are from migrant workers. Well, they're going to have different types of test scores. You know, the same numbers for them aren't going to really be measuring a value add as maybe a school in more affluent community. So you need to understand the data you're looking at. But we know this. We know if parents are clamoring to go to that school, that's telling us something. And I think we need to be encouraging our state to look in that direction. So we'll go to the next slide. So getting information, that's the first thing that you need to work on, to understand what choices how your money is being spent at the local level, how it's being spent from the state. Over half our state budget gets spent on K-12 education. So if you're going to reform anything in Georgia, if you're going to fix the way Georgia spends money, if you're going to improve the economic situation of our state, you cannot do that without addressing how we spend our educational dollars. That's the biggest group of money. So I have a couple of filters, exactly two, kids and taxpayers. And if it's good for kids and taxpayers, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not concerned about bureaucratic jobs. So and too often that's the decision-making process that I've found that goes on either tacitly or explicitly. Usually tacitly because they want to talk about something else really rather than jobs being protected at a central office. But I'm all about value for your dollars too. So what are you getting per each dollar spent? One of the things a lot of people are interested or they don't necessarily know this. We spend in Georgia in the top 10 in educational dollars in the United States. So we're the top 10 in money. So when they talk about, you hear a lot of times a bureaucrat say, oh, well, we don't spend enough money. Oh, it's always more money. Well, that's not the case, and I'll have a chart about that in a second. But in Georgia, sadly, our outcomes are usually in the bottom 5. In fact, they just released an algebra proficiency rating, and we were 50th. So, and you know, when Melvin Everson was talking about STEM and how we need, you know, more science, technology, engineering, and math, well, if you're 50 in algebra, it's going to get real hard to attract companies and meet those needs. So this is, you know, and yet we're spending in the top 10. So these things are not congruent, okay? So why are we then getting such bad value for our dollar? And this is important to look at. Well, no, don't go there. So when you're looking at, when we want to start looking into financial information about, well, how is my school system spending dollars? And how do I get this information? Well, first of all, you need to know it is your right to have this information, to know. So you can ask for, almost everything is subject to open records and public records except for very specific personnel information. So it is your right to know. You can even request work product documents, not even just the end documents. So looking at how your money is being spent is important. So you can go to that website, the open government website, that first one, and if you go to my website too, nancyjester.com, you scroll down to the bottom, there's a link there for to that website. That website is goes to Sam Olin's, our Attorney General's, one of his pages about how you request a document, how you go about completing an open records request to get information. And they can talk you through that. The next one is the Department of Education's website. So that's, and if you just were to Google Georgia DOE, you would come up with that. If you scroll down to the bottom of that webpage, there's a lot of information you can get by clicking on school reports. You can get financial reports for your district. Sadly, our DOE is 2 years behind on the financial data they provide on that. So, you know, maybe that's by design, maybe it's an accident. Either way, it's completely unacceptable. But so the latest data is 2 years old, but it's still illustrative, and you can get it there. The Attorney General's Office does have an open records mediation program, so if you find that you are not getting the information you request, you can contact Stephen Ritter, and that phone number, so this is on the website of the Attorney General's Office. And I'll put these slides on my website as well to make them available, so if anybody wants this information, you can get it off my website.
That's NancyJester.com.
NancyJester.com, so we'll put it on there. We'll put it on the front page. Okay, so when they talk about spending and say, oh, you know, we're always cutting spending, you know, except for that dip that you see, you know, due to the recession in which we had more federal money that came in. You know, there's a trajectory there. You know, I grew up in South Georgia, but I can see where that's going. You know, I see those numbers. So, and again, we spend in the top 10, okay, in the top 10. So let's not pretend that we have, you know, the most expensive economy down here either. So we should be able to, you know, be getting more value per dollar spent. So can we go to the next slide? This is a sample budget. I have to stand up for a second. I hope that's okay. Am I breaking rules if I stand up?
No, you're
okay,
fine.
I don't want to break them.
We have no rules for free market.
I know it's really hard to see this, but I'll put this on my website. Gosh, I can't even read when I get close. It looks like hieroglyphics. Okay, well, when you go and see this on my website, you will see that there are different salary categories, and these are the salary categories that get reported to the state. I ask everybody, look at your salary categories and look at the growth pattern over time in them. What you'll see instructional salaries, administrative salaries, transportation salaries, maintenance and operation salaries, these different categories. And in the sample that I have, I have pulled the different years. And what's been interesting since, I think I started, this is like 2006 through current, and we've had, we're wringing our hands and national, oh, we need more money, we need more money. Well, what's really interesting is we see the devastation in this sample budget, and I'll let you think of where I got it. You can ponder where I pulled this from. But so in this sample budget, we saw the increase or the decrease in salaries, particularly instructional salaries. We had about a 25% decrease there. Okay, so that affects our babies. That's those children in the classroom. There's more kids in the classroom now. Teachers are doing more, having to keep track of more. But there was a salary category that had, over this time, the same time we had all these decreases, one salary category went up almost 15%. And that was administration. So, and that's just the salary for administration. So these are the types of things when you go to look at your district's budgets that will help you see and be able to cut through the rhetoric and the reality. You know what I mean? So you can be able to understand, does the money match what their mouth is saying? And often it just doesn't. So, and you need to hold them accountable for that. Variances in financial statements. I think this is very important. I asked when I was on the DeKalb board if we could see a variance report. And I've noticed it's been removed, sadly. But I think I do my own variance report, so if they don't provide it, that's okay. You've got a calculator, you can do it. Why that's important is I think that a lot of the bureaucrats generally tend to think that you're not going to see the differentials from year to year and month to month or actual to budget. So what I noticed a technique is they will under budget items significantly that they don't think anyone's paying attention to, and then go and spend 200 times that budget in an area. We had a case in DeKalb where we budgeted every year for the better part of a decade. We budgeted we budgeted $10 million for electricity costs, but every year they were $15 to $16 million. Well, that differential, $5 to $6 million, adds up over time, and you are basically eating away at the accumulated cash reserves of your school system. And that's just one budget category, and this was going on in several budget categories. And when I discovered it, I was the first person to discover it, first person to note it. I started blogging about it, asking questions about it, and hilarity ensued, actually. I would be told, well, it was hot year, well, it was cold year. But actually, if you look back, it was remarkably consistent. Our bill was always the same, between $15 and $16 million for this line item, but yet every year we budgeted $10 million. Why would you do that? Well, you do that because then they didn't have to cut salaries somewhere else. And they thought you wouldn't be looking here. We go over budget. Well, it's just taxpayers' money, right? It's always going to come in. So this is one of the techniques. So look at your variances. Look at your budgets to actuals. It's really important to do that. Compare year to year. For instance, some years you'll say, wow, why did they all of a sudden assume $8 million more in this line item? I don't understand why they would do that. There's no rationale for that. Ask them why they do that. There's a number of, you can either pad your revenue projections or under budget your expenses. So look for those types of things. One of the things also note, June 30 is the fiscal year end. But the financial statements that include all the accrued liabilities are filed much later with the Department of Education. So you don't have a full picture at 6/30. You won't have that until some months later, and then it will be audited. And that can be the next year. So there's this lag time and delay in really understanding what just happened that year in your school system. But you can request the financial statement that gets filed with the DOE. I suggest everyone do that. That's also very interesting. So let me just talk about a couple of other things. But school choice, I think Andrew said it. I think you said it. The way we fund school is very complicated, and it is. And I think that's another technique. We need to simplify funding, and because it's not attached to a child. It's attached to 6 periods of day of one day where they count how your child could fit into 19 different funding categories. I mean, this is ridiculously complicated, and it impedes portability of student funds. So we need to do anything and everything to encourage our legislators to simplify the funding formula, to make it more easily portable, and so that our charter schools are getting funded properly, because it's clear cut. This is how much this student should receive over here in the charter school, so that, you know, when we have other forms, other school choice options, it's very clear what it means for each child to go and take their money with them. And that will enhance transparency, and it will enhance accountability at that level right now that talks a lot about holding their teachers accountable, but who's holding these guys accountable for the dollars and the performances and being 50 out of 50 on algebra, you know? So there's some incentives, I think, for transparency and results. I've blogged about some of these. If you have a board or some administrators that aren't, they're running deficits, or their student achievement is lagging, I think that their compensation should be eliminated, you know, because they're not doing their job, so they shouldn't get paid for it. I think that if your district is constantly having to request these class size waivers, and so we're putting more and more in the classroom, well, I think that could be a trigger for eliminating or lowering compensation to boards. And holding superintendents accountable for any declination. Perhaps if you have 2 years of declination in student achievement, we might want to talk about, we have to license you to be a superintendent in the state. Do we want to look at that and determine if you're not keeping up with that, whether you should be licensed to be a superintendent? It is not a job in perpetuity, and sometimes, you know, our boards aren't capable of holding these folks accountable, it seems. They let them go on. So how do we do that? These are just some suggestions, at least to dialogue about it, things that we need to start talking about to improve it. So yeah, and next slide. And that's my website again, and how to get in touch with me. And on Twitter, sometimes I put hashtag mom with a calculator. So if you ever want to say something, do that hashtag. I like hashtags. So that's my spiel, and I guess we're open for questions.
All right. Guys, unfortunately, we're going to have to transition to the next section here, but thank you all. Can we get a round of applause? Most of you will be around for a little bit more portion of the day, right? Okay, so definitely find one or all three of them if you have additional questions, and definitely take some of the materials. Remember the bank that we talked about for the charter schools, if charter schools are for you.
Nancy made a very good point.
Yeah.
The 3 years Nathan Deal's been governor, we put an additional $400 billion in education. So when you hear this whining, and we cut all these other things. We cut all these other things a lot more than we cut education. So if money was the answer, the city of Atlanta would be in the newspaper every day.
Yeah, we'd be turning things around
That's
faster.
exactly.
Yeah, it is a very good point. But the issue is not the money, and the solution is not throw more money at the
No.
problem. I think we've seen that.
You just find more failure.
Exactly. Buy yourself more time for more failure. Thank you all for coming, and we'll be transitioning into the next meeting in this room, which will be, let me grab my sheet.